as I have been telling some of you people that I served for 36 years, more than 36 years in Geological Survey of India. And my role there was, I started as a hard rock geologist, that mostly dealing with the rock part of the our Mother Earth. So after putting some geological mapping close to the Gujarat also, that way my field area was mostly limited to Udaipur, Dungarpur and Banswara area. After that, I joined Northern region, and I was posted in a mineral exploration division, and I have to attend to my field duties in Himalayas to carry out the exploration work for minerals in Himalaya areas, that is in mostly in Garhwal group of rocks. And while I was carrying out all those work, I have been sent to International Training Center, that is ITC of Netherlands. And that was the period when first I realized, after going through so many thin section study there, I realized are basically nothing but hydrocarbons, or what you call as that kerogen or all those things. You know, there is a big gulf in between a petroleum geologist and a hard rock geologist, and I don't know who has created that gulf, and we are not allowed to cross anything. So when I was told to give a small talk or whatever you call it, I call it as an interaction. If you have any problem in understanding anything at any point of time, please ask me immediately, or write to my email address or my phone number, which I have already displayed here in the beginning. So you can ask me. So I wanted to start with just bridging this gap or gulf in between a petroleum geologist, because you are a budding geologist, all my younger friends. So I would like that there is no gulf in between us, because we are working for the Mother Earth. We are trying to explore the mysteries of our Mother Earth. So now I start with my today's deliberation of role of hydrocarbons in the genesis of ore deposits. This is a very interesting thing which I found, you know, in last 2 decades, because it was a period of 1988 or suppose 1988 to 90 when I was there in Netherlands, when I was interacting with so many of my teachers there. And one of them was I was very much impressed with him. He was Dr. Westerhoff. He was professor there. So he rather initiated me to look something for hydrocarbon or kerogen, which is present in the minerals, or rather metallic minerals, or in the ore of metallic minerals. So I will tell you here that in last 2 decades, the intimate association between ore, one thing I would like to ask you people here, whether you are conversant in English, or shall I come in Hindi also, because I know only 2 languages.
Sir, that will be okay. English or Hindi. I mean, mostly we follow English, but I mean, it depends on you.
Anywhere, if I am going too tough or something like that, हम हिंदी में आ जाएंगे, कोई दिक्कत नहीं मुझे हिंदी.
Sure, because why we follow English is we have multinational people here.
Yeah, no, I know.
That's right.
Thank you. So you know, there are so many types of ore deposits, which are very closely associated with the hydrocarbons, that include Mississippi Valley type deposit, that is MVT, which we call. That is basically a lead zinc deposit in carbonate rocks. And there is another type of deposit that is known as VMS, or volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit. There is another type of deposit very close to them is Kupferschiefer. It is a German term. It is just a copper shale, you can say, type of copper deposit. A Carlin is a very close to Mississippi type of deposit, but it is basically a gold deposit, invisible gold deposit. Slightly temperature is more in this case. And then sediment hosted uranium deposits and several other types of deposits, which are found to be very closely associated with the hydrocarbons, which is, I think, your main emphasis of study there in Parul University. Everything is deposited in sedimentary basin of past and present, and it remains very significant loci for deposit for both fossil energy source and metallic ore deposits. That is what I have just told you. It has also been determined that the both ore deposit source, rock and petroleum sources have a high amount of metal concentration. Whenever these kerogen or bitumens have been studied, they have been found to carry a lot of metals in them. And it was really a very puzzling thing how a metal content, so high metal content is available in them. And as I have told you that in many of the thin sections for metallic cores, when we found that gangue minerals in our previous BSc days, our teacher used to tell that it is all gangue, or at the maximum they used to tell us it is all iron content. But we were thoroughly confused. What is this actually? Gangue mineral is a big thing, and I will request here all my young friends, because you are pursuing students of a science which is very, very, very vibrant. So you must always question whenever you find anything and you go through them, then you must question that what it is actually. Don't club it into a very big group for which nobody knows what particularly it is. And on a regional scale, both ore deposit and hydrocarbon reservoirs, their deposits are generally bounded by the same tectonic units, because one basin, if there is one basin and it is separated by another basin, so their tectonic units or boundaries are same for both of them. Especially the regional anticline domes and paleo highs are same for metallic minerals as well as for the hydrocarbons. Now I will tell you the role of hydrocarbons. Organic and ore-rich sediment in sedimentary basins are recognized as a source for both ore and hydrocarbon reservoirs, because this is the fault which we were committing as a student while in our graduation days. We used to club them differently. Organic deposit is something different, and the metal-rich sediments are something different. And we used to create such a boundary that we never jump from one place to another place. And that was our maximum confusion. So it is nothing like that. Mother Earth never produces anything like that. Everything comes from the one source, and source, if it is not from one source, it may be at least one or two sources. That's all. So that is what I want to emphasize here, that organic and oil-rich or rich sediments in a sedimentary basin are recognized as a source of both ore deposits and hydrocarbon reservoirs. They constitute ore deposits and hydrocarbon reservoirs are characterized by different deposition and trapping mechanism in different compartments. That is the only difference in between them. Then metallic ores like copper, lead, zinc are deposited in faults, fracture zones, unconformity surfaces in the areas where the ore-bearing fluids are encountered. Appropriate geochemical barriers. Geochemical barriers are nothing but these are the zones occurring in the Earth's crust with the sharp physical and chemical gradients, and they are often associated with the concentrations of elements. Sometimes to the extent of forming ore deposit. That is what here I am presenting. 4 fundamental classes of geochemical barriers are identified. One of them is mechanical barrier. Second one is physiochemical barrier. Mostly we deal with the mechanical and physiochemical barriers. And third one is biochemical barriers. And fourth one is anthropogenic, that is human made. When we modify our Mother Earth with our own activity, then it becomes an anthropogenic activity. Hydrocarbons accumulate in stratigraphic, lithological, and structural trap that we already know. And metallic, in the fault, fracture, concentrated. Thus, it has been deduced that in emphasis will be on this point, that if you look for one thing, we should also look for the other thing. That is, if you are looking for hydrocarbon, we should also look for vice versa. In case of cases, all world war. matter and the derivatives have long variety is partially, that is in time and space together, are associated components in high temperature ore environments. I'm not talking of limestone deposit or this phosphate deposit, or I'm talking mostly of metallic deposits. In many of our provinces, organic matter resides in its source rocks, migrating in the form of hydrocarbons or in transient, permanent, leaking or degrading reservoir is observed. Over-matured hydrocarbons, which I was talking just, kerosene, which is actually a solid bitumen or a pyrobitumen. I was talking of pyrobitumen. Pyrobitumen, I have given it just a, I think most of you people know also about it. Pyrobitumen is found in association with copper ores in southern ore bodies of El Salado copper deposit in central Chile. Texture indicates that the petroleum occupied the host rock porosity before the copper mineralization. It is a very funny thing. Previously, when the study has found that previously all these pore spaces in the rock was occupied by petroleum. And when copper precipitated there, it occupied, and they vacated the porosity for copper to deposit there. And isotopic data for copper, carbon and oxygen is also indicating that the same thing has happened because it has come from organic sources and forming carbon and CO3 affiliation with organic carbon, and suggests that the gangue carbonates are the the result of oxidation of hydrocarbons. It has been found. Now it is degraded hydrocarbon reservoirs. The solution was moving, and when it interacted with the pre-existing degraded, that is pyrobitumen, then the precipitation took place. Hydrocarbons physically prevent low-grade metamorphic minerals from sealing the porosity. Just I have told you in between, just before this, that hydrocarbon physically prevented the low-grade metamorphic minerals from sealing, because if the rock is fully sealed, there is no space for the precipitates of the minerals to deposit there, and they are oxidized to form the carbonate gangue and alteration, and possibly act as a reductant at the site of sulfide precipitation, which I will be explaining you in my further slides. Copper sulfide, that is mostly bornite, chalcopyrite, chalcocite, fill the spaces among the bitumen, carbonate, and pre-existing sulfides like arsenopyrite and pyrite only after significant burial and faulting of the host volcanic strata or trachyte. Trachyte is just a intermediate extrusive rock closer to cyanide. Subvolcanic intrusives have occurred after the migration of liquid petroleum into porosity and during and after its solidification there. It has been found. This makes the syngenetic and early, because why I'm telling you, previously you used to think that it is all syngenetic and digenetic models. But later on, when this hydrocarbon theory came into being, then we found that it is nothing but afterwards the hydrocarbons have helped them to deposit there. Similar occurrences of bitumen in the areas of Talcuna, copper and manganese districts, and in several other strata-bound copper deposits in central and south central Chile and other where too, suggest that the organic matter may have been involved in the genesis of many Andean manto type. Manto type deposit is also very close to this Mississippi Valley type of deposit, but it is higher temperature. So that means that volcanic source was closer to it. Temperature was higher in that case, manto type deposit. It is a very well-known deposit, and at many places the same type of setup has been found world over. Textural evidence indicates that the copper sulfides were introduced much later than the deposition of the strata and intrusion. That is what goes against our previous theory of syngenetic and diagenetic deposition. And cooling of subvolcanic trachytes. Trachytes I have just explained to you. It is just a extrusive phase of cyanide, which until recently was implied to be a feeder for the mineralizing solutions. Copper sulfides replace the pre-existing sulfides, that is arsenopyrite and pyrites, and furthermore filled open spaces and replace solid bitumen and carbonates. The organic carbon is suggested to have been preparatory physical effect on the host rock, preventing the sealing, that is what I have told you, of porosity during the burial metamorphism, and the chemical effect leading to the formation of carbonates and probably serving as a reductant to the ore precipitation. Reduction equation I will be just giving you in another slide. The identification of source trap system that could have generated oil or gas reservoirs, which in turn could have interacted later with the hydrothermal solution from various sources, may be useful exploration model for the metallic ore deposit in back arc basin of the Andes mountains. That is now mountain in those days when it used to be a back arc basin. Hydrocarbon provided, I'm giving just a model of that, what I have told you in the beginning. The presence of oil gas instead of water will prevent the cementation of sediments and provide the space for the minerals to occupy the space. This is just they are giving a space for them to sit there and become a deposit there. So it is doing a great help to mankind for people like us who are exploring for them. I'm giving another thing. This is how a migration of hydrocarbons is taking place. Anticline, it is getting preserved in an anticlinal part, and later on hydrothermal solutions, how they migrate and then they interact with these hydrocarbons and deposit in the third slide, if you say, some entrapment and migration and preservation takes place in the. Shall I move ahead? Hello? Okay. Therefore, it is to conclude here that the involvement of petroleum in the genesis of strata-bound copper deposit in Cretaceous Andean basin have been a critical component in the formation of economic deposits of this kind, as well as, that is what I have told you, Mississippi Valley type. It is a carbonate hosted lead zinc deposit, Mississippi Valley type. You know, in Dehradun also, in the area of Dehradun and many other places in India also, this Mississippi Valley type deposit is classified and has been explored and exploited both. In most significantly, it is documented now that documented and which says that it is a precipitation in the formation of both main group of Manto type. Manto I have just told you, deposit in Pillara type Canning Basin, lead zinc deposit of Western Australia also is similar to them. This is a process of hydrocarbons which provide redox, that is reduction or oxidation condition for the deposits of the ores. Here you see what happens, and I will tell you. I think most of you, yeah. I think these people have seen this chart also before also, isn't?
Pardon, I can't. I mean, what do you want to say?
No, I am telling you that I am just giving a sketch type of diagram just to show that how oxidation.
It's totally okay. It's totally okay. No problem.
Okay. I think most of our young friends have a chemistry background also, isn't it?
Sir, here we have people from mostly petroleum engineering, then MSc petrochemical, then MSc geology, and
MSc geology. Okay.
Yeah, mostly petroleum allied courses.
Okay. So their course structure does it? I'm in confirmation to their course, or I'm going away from their course. I just want to inquire, क्या मैं जो बता रहा हूँ क्या उनके कोर्स से जुड़ा हुआ है कि कहीं बाहर जा रहा हूँ मैं उससे?
No, sir, it's totally within the reach.
Okay. Thank you. So what I would like to present here that in oxidation, what happens? You lose 2 electrons, and in when reduction takes place, the element gains 2 oxygens or 2 electrons. And now a term I will be using here is a thermochemical sulfate reduction, which happens for hydrocarbons when they act, and then how the game is played here. The hydrocarbons, how they reduce and precipitate the minerals present in the system and immobilize them there. So thermochemical sulfate reduction is a thermally, because 200 degree temperature is also needed for them, at least. So thermally driven a biological, it is not a biological one, reduction of a sulfate by hydrocarbons at the temperature probably less than 200 in a natural system, producing combination of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. Carbonate minerals like calcite, element like sulfur, native sulfur I mean, and various organic sulfur compound and water. Water is also produced in that. TSR reductions are considered to be important to the origin of high hydrogen sulfide concentration, or H2S, what we call in our chemistry classes, H2S concentration in petroleum reservoir. And it is not a very welcome thing in a petroleum reservoirs to have a lot of H2S. And for this is the chemical formula for that, thermochemical sulfate reduction, where C hydride reacts with the hydrocarbons to form calcium carbonate and hydrogen sulfide and H2O. TSR are originally described as a process by which a hydrocarbon gases at a high temperature would react with an, and this is the calcite trap mineral, metallic minerals in them. The reaction will consume the hydrocarbon gases producing H2S and CO2. The CO2 often reacts with the calcium from the anhydride, which is present in a drying sea where this process is taking place, to form a CaCO3, that is calcium carbonate, usually in the form of calcite cement. The process is autocatalytic and catalytic, and H2S is both product and catalyst both. The studies carried out proposes that the intrabasinal shale units of Witwater, I think most of the people here must be knowing something about Witwater sand supergroup of South Africa. It is a very well-known geological supergroup which is producing both uranium and gold, where the source for the pyrobitumen in the carbon ladder reef. These shales produced and released liquid hydrocarbons during the burial of sedimentary succession. It is a very win-win situation for these shales. Phyllosilicate enriched in trace elements were transferred from shale into newly produced liquids. This is from the pyrobitumen, the liquid which are produced, the hydrocarbons which are produced due to rise in temperature. This uranium goes into that. Hydrocarbon dissolved detrital uranium present in the basin, adding to a uranium budget, because now the concentration of uranium becomes more in them, in these hydrocarbons. Converted into precipitated uraninite thermal fluids, interact with the hydrocarbons and deposit gold also by reduction, because reduction was there, it is reduced there, and it goes into the hydrocarbon surfaces there. Now I will be putting here a slide section of that Witwatersrand sand of South Africa. This is a detailed image of Witwatersrand sand. Here what happens, you read it here. Detailed image of high-grade gold in the carbon-rich reef at Ellsberg mine in Witwatersrand pyrite. Pyrite is in a light gray. Can you see it? It is in light gray everywhere. With fissures. You can see fissures also in them. And then gold. Gold is in yellow form. You see a lot of gold is also there in this slide of section of Witwatersrand pyrite. Witwatersrand pyrites. And then uraninite is a light gray. It is in between this pyrobitumen. Black colors are all pyrobitumens. In between you will find a slightly less, more gray part, which has a shining like some stars there. It is medium gray with specks of galena. Uraninite and thucolite is also there. Thucolite is nothing but is a pyrobitumen with the traces of uranium and thorium. And wavy pyrobitumen is dark wavy gray and black. Mostly it is here you can see specks of all pyrobitumen in between them. Some smaller, some bigger, like that. Isn't it? Okay, I am proceeding further. Interaction of these fluids with the hydrocarbons may have released uranium, the thorium, the rare earth elements, REE, that is what we call, and lead from the hydrocarbons and triggered the formation of secondary baronite. Baronite is a sesqui oxide of manganese, monazite, that is cesium, and galena. So a lot of very important minerals are available with them, and it is precipitated with the reaction with hydrocarbons. Thus, the study provides a convincing evidence that the hydrocarbon liquid that formed by the pyrobitumen seams in the carbon ladder reef of Witwatersrand played an essential role in the remobilization and redeposition of uranium and gold, respectively, in Witwatersrand supergroup. It has a what you call a bouldery deposit also. Cobble and Witwatersrand. Interesting that way, Witwatersrand deposits in this Witwatersrand supergroup. Though hydrocarbon contribute metallic ions to depositing ore bodies, that is what I have just presented here. Some striking example is that some of you have been knowing about inorganic origin of petroleum also, because there is a group of Russian geologists and petroleum geologists who say that lot of petroleum which is available in the reservoirs have not come through the decomposition of organic material, but from the asthenosphere of our mantle part through some feather leaks and all those places. So I'm just giving just a small glimpse of it. Active submarine hydrothermal system produce the sulfide metal ore. That is for sure, that we all know that it is produced there. The active submarine hydrothermal system produce the sulfide metal ore deposit along the whole length of East Pacific rise. I will give you a map also after that. And at 13 degree north, the axis of EPR, that is East Pacific rise, is a free of all the sediment, but there is a aliphatic. Aliphatic is a direct chain hydrocarbon, carbon and hydrogen, are present in a hot hydrothermal fluids of black smoker that I have given you. Just smoker is a small chimney-like body from where the these leaks are coming from the mantle, and it is getting precipitated due to the alkalinity and due to reaction with the seawater. In sulfide metal ores are methane and alkane higher than the N20 odd number of carbon atoms have been identified by the worker. This is the map of where it has been, the research work has shown us the study. Okay. It is a geological location map showing the hydrothermal vent field with the associated organic matter, alteration and sketch geological tectonics. I think whole of the globe has been shown here. Organic materials of diverse kind have been invoked as a key component in all stages of the process, from fixing the metal and sulfide in the source rock and carrying the metal and sulfur in fluid migration phase to participating the mineral sulfide at the site of ore deposition. Now, I would like to just put some thinking shot in the minds of our young friends. Hydrocarbon versus the ore deposits. For hydrocarbons, many changes in the basin structure or temperature will change the location. How they differ? First, I told you how they collaborated in getting deposited themselves at different locations of the same basin. Now I will tell you how they differ also. For hydrocarbons, many changes in basin structure or temperature will change the location and nature of the accumulation, or will almost destroy also. If the temperature is too much, it will be destroyed, and most of the basin they are destroyed also. In Bengal Basin and at many places where we find metal deposit, ore deposit, we find the signatures of hydrocarbon, but actually we don't find them. It is because of some change in the temperature, apart from other changes, that we don't find them. So it has been destroyed, and we classify them as a gangue mineral or something like that. Ore deposit, once crystallized into mass. First, I told you how hydrocarbons have a very short life if it is not suiting to them. But it is the other way around for the ore deposits. Once deposits are crystallized into mass mineral, whatever may happen in the deformation will happen there in the basin. It will not alter. It may be slightly displaced from one place to another place, but it will not go anywhere. It will remain there with the enclosing rock as a structural and thermal evolution of the basin proceeds. It will not hamper their deposition or its location or its being there, its existence there. Third is very important. I think most of you know the Vadose zone. A second important difference between the oil field and ore bodies is that in many ore bodies, they will not only survive into zone of Vadose. Vadose is just a zone before our water table. So what happens? Most of the supergene enrichment starts taking place. So even if the deposit is very low, it gets concentrated above the Vadose zone. But what will happen with the hydrocarbons? Most of them will leak and go away. So it is if one exists very well there, others will go away. It will die. So a second important difference between the oil feed and ore bodies is that many ore deposits not only survive into zone of Vadose circulation, which causes oil and gas loss by leakage or biodegradation, but may be enhanced by these late stage supergene enrichment, which I just told you. It is a small diagram of this Vadose zone. It may be therefore concluded that the trap site for the metal may be far and more diverse type than the trap site for the hydrocarbons. So in variety of conditions, they come together, but their housing colony may be different. One prefers a very favorable loci for them, whereas the other one can reside anywhere in that case. It is a very diverse type of sites. They must be expected to include such feature as the sediment water interface and redox boundaries in the Vadose zone, in addition to the porosity, permeability, and buoyancy control trap familiar to hydrocarbons. Furthermore, one must expect them to differ from the element to element. What happens? It is not common for all the elements or the ore elements. It may differ from one ore to another ore, but basically it will not be very different for everything. In any other element showing a diversity of trapping at least equal to that shown by the oil. But however, diversity will be there. It will always be there. What happens? Just I have told you that smokers are the just chimneys like we have in our old kitchens where the smoke goes out. It occurs in the bottom of sea, deep sea, where these smokers keep on ogling the metal through a feather leak or deep fracture and getting precipitated in the the sea brine condition. Compelling evidence of brine hydrocarbon interaction being directly associated with the ore formation of Pilara and Mississippi type deposit that is also in South Africa. It is found that the lead and zinc ore formation at Pilara were driven by the reduction of metalliferous acid sulfate brine as a result of interaction between hydrocarbons and the ore deposition site. So apart from the hydrocarbons which I have just now discussed, the brine also, when it is carrying with lot of minerals and lot of ore minerals, it interacts with the hydrocarbon because then the reduction process takes place and the precipitation takes place there of these metallic elements as a result of interaction with the hydrocarbon at the ore deposited site. Metal partitioning into hydrocarbons from the ore forming brines may also have contributed to zinc and lead enrichment process. And some evidences for the low pH fluids have also been observed in those deposition environment. Now, what I would like to emphasize here, why I have told you all those things, why we should look with our eyes and mind and our ears open, that there is a lot of gap which still we don't know, and we should look for very attentively into all these gaps so that we also understand, and in process we help in discovering more hydrocarbon deposits and ore deposits. There is a vast literature on ore deposit, but nobody is very sure about the genesis of these things. Whereas in the case of hydrocarbons, the genesis of hydrocarbons in a particular basin is very well known. So what I would like to say here, we should also put more emphasis that there is a lot of opinion difference also, because there is not a very pakka research on those things, how these things have been generated. In Mount Isa, I am giving you just an example of it. In Mount Isa in Australia, the copper, lead and zinc ores within the same mine, they have been postulated to have a different origins. The lead zinc, syngenetic, what we call a syngenetic deposit, whereas for copper we say it is epigenetic. I think if you want to listen more about this syngenetic and epigenetic, either you go to library and just see. It is a very simple thing. And post-folding and post-folding, that is what they say. After this work was carried out, some research work was also carried out. So they have given this theory that the lead zinc is syngenetic, whereas the copper is epigenetic. And post-folding and post-folding. Whereas same type of thing in Zambia, in Africa, same setup has been classified as syngenetic, and Anglo mines all the epigenetic. But the same thing has been, same copper has been put there as a epigenetic, whereas in African setup, same thing has been classified as syngenetic and lead zinc as a epigenetic. So just reverse they have made there. So that is what I would like to tell you, that we have to put more emphasis in studying the genesis of a ore deposit, how it has happened. Because once you study the basin of it, where it has been deposited, then you will have more knowledge about the genesis of the ore deposit. More fruitful approach to this problem is to consider the first metal. Because I have just told you that copper has occupied the previously occurring pyrite and pyroxenite, pyrite and arsenopyrite. But we forget when we discover a deposit, we forget how it has happened. We just try to exploit and go away from there. But that is not good. If you want to see its extension, or if you want to discover same type of setup somewhere else, then you have to have a good knowledge of whatever you have done. A more fruitful approach to this problem is to consider first metal deposit, which are the least deformed and overprinted for the study. For the study, you have to study for the study, you have to study the least deformed and overprinted metals, first metals. Even though the deposit selected by the is uneconomical. That is what I have told you. The pyrite and arsenopyrite may not be very economical, but if they have occurred first, they have printed there in the deposition as first, then you have to find that from where they have come, whether they were really first or we are just calling them by their association as first, or much less value than of deformed or metamorphosed ore deposit. We are interested in copper, lead, and zinc. We would never consider pyrite and arsenopyrite because they fetch less value for us if we exploit them. How to utilize the knowledge gained so far? I have just gone through a small deliberation how the hydrocarbons are related to the ore deposit, ore genesis. So now, if it has gone, at least I have covered some part of it, and I am able to succeed in you people in getting understand all these things. I would like to tell you, mineral exploration is really a lack of adequate genetic concept. That is what I was trying to emphasize from the beginning, and it's focused entirely on traps. Just we see where it is occurring. We just study that place. We never go into the genetic model of it. If the mineralization is not known at the outcrop or in a drill hole, because if either it is occurring as just exposure on the surface, or we put some drill holes, or geophysical method. Through geophysical methods, we try to decipher its configuration. If it is not a strong geophysical expression, then there is no way to identify a basin, because basin is just a concave thing. Until unless that concave things becomes convex thing and it comes to the surface or near to the surface, however it may be a big deposit, we cannot discover it because we don't know the genesis of that basin. Unlike the situation in oil exploration, there is no because in oil exploration we know what type of basin we have to look for the oil. Unlike the situation in the oil exploration, there is no understanding of the source of the metal in the sediment-hosted ore bodies. There is a lot of gray areas. That is what I would like to tell here. To adopt and adapt also the successful oil exploration approach to the exploration for the concealed mineral targets. Because our forefathers have already exploited all those deposits which were occurring near the surface, over the surface, or just below the surface. They have already exploited, and I am telling you an example of Himalayas, because it is very, very difficult to find a deposit now. It may be very deep seated, and terrain is very tough. You cannot take bigger geophysical machinery there to study those things. So it becomes very difficult, even for a helicopter or small planes also. It is very difficult to move into those valleys. To adopt and adapt the successful oil exploration approach, the exploitation of concealed mineral target in basin need to do in this way, which I am going to present here. Exploration for a stratum or a strata-bound ore deposit in a sedimentary basin present many problems because we already either we say that it is stratiform or strata-bound. It presents many problems when the potential host basin is not folded and deposited, and deposits are not brought to outcrop. That is what I just told you now. The exploration program for stratiform ore body controlled by the facies architecture of a basin will be different to a program seeking a strata-bound, because you know a strata-bound, a stratiform deposit is a stratibound, but most of the strata-bound bodies are not a stratiform. That is a very difficult situation. So seeking a strata-bound bodies controlled by growth faults, and both will be different from the from a system that owes its value to supergene processes at the sometime in the past, because then we get confused from where it has generated. Research into the fluid movement and sulfide precipitation in the modern basin can be used to establish the basic principle and processes at the work, and should be closely linked with the much more advanced study of oil, gas, and geothermal fluid behavior. You know what happened? I will tell you. It is just a game of money, because there is a lot of money in if you discover oil. So lot of good brain, good technique, good machinery, good equipment are hired there or placed there to study. But if you find a very small deposit of ore, money, nobody is ready to invest that much money. Of course, later on when it becomes bigger and it is a concealed part, when it comes into front or you discover it, then many investments are being made into it. The ultimate objective of this exercise shall be practical to improve our chances of exploration success and reduce the waste of resource, because you know a lot of resource is wasted by the government agencies as well as the private agencies if to explore this thing and reduce the waste of resources involved in the unsuccessful exploration of a barren basin. We go on, and lot of public money that way is getting wasted in that. I will tell you a small trivia here. Major deposits also occur in basin which have not been strongly deformed, because you know for a ore deposit we always say that it has to be very strongly deformed and eroded and all those things. If you go into Himalayan terrain, most of our senior workers will keep on telling, "Arey yaar, abhi to ye stage mein pahuncha hi nahi ki hum log kuch discover kar paye." Matlab you get disheartened right from the beginning itself. So that is why I wanted to put it like this, because we have example. Major deposits also occur in basin which have not been strongly deformed and deeply eroded as a non-outcropping and sub-horizontal sheet, Polish Kupferschiefer. Because you know Kupferschiefer is a very, very big deposit of Europe. It covers around 600,000 square kilometer of area, but the Kupferschiefer shale is 32 to 60 centimeter thick only. So it is almost a very thin film life of thing, extending for a very vast area. Of the four Sudatic basin was there. It is a structure of a monocline or a linear belt of Missouri, Admiral Bay in northwest Australia. It is believed that the both Polish Kupferschiefer, Admiral Bay deposits were found by chance during oil and gas exploration. That is what I wanted to explain here. Ki all those ore deposits were discovered by the chance. Deposits were discovered by chance because we were already exploiting oil and gas from there. And deposits of this type are similar in attitude and dimension to small, medium-sized ore deposit, gas deposit fields only. Thank you. This is what I wanted to present you here. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Hello?
sir. Sir, it was a very nice talk.
I don't know. I think I have to thank you so much.
Keeping students' point of view, it was a simplified talk for students. Students like these kind of
talk. Right. And
students like
this presentation, if you want to, you can have. I have no problem.
That could be.
I mean this PowerPoint.
But because
how can I share it?
By having
anybody want to have it?
Complicated language sometimes make it difficult for the student.
Your voice is choppy. I don't know. It is cut ke aa rahi awaaz.
Sir, we want the PPT.
Yeah, of course. How can I share it with you? I don't know.
Sharing to mail,
yes.
Mail through mail.
Yeah. I can send you mail. Vishal, Professor Vishal, I can send it to you mail.
That was good.
No, definitely. I will share with you. No problem.
Yeah, if you want to share.
Thank you, sir.
This.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just because share this. Share should I
tell me the PPT?
No, there is a button share. Should I share it?
If you send me, I'll share with those students who are interested.
Okay. I will share with you. No problem. I will send it. No problem.
You can simply send me through email.
Okay. No problem. Thank you. So nice of you people.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it times happens this way. What I was saying is, yes, okay, sir. So the entire petroleum Parel University staff. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Because 25. Thank you.
So thank you very much for coming here and giving us this much information. And we'll hope your support in future as well.
Yeah. Anytime. Whatever subject you give, please give me in advance. I will, if I'm able to, I will be feeling very happy to share my whatever I know about those things.
Sure,
Thank
sir.
you.
Sure.
So kind of you. And
see you.
Goodbye to everyone. Good day.
Yeah,
and goodbye.
You can leave, sir. No problem. You can leave the meeting. It will end.